How can I consume digital media if I don't even know what it looks like?
Who are you? Oh my god.
What?
Oh my god. Oh no.
Welcome to episode 2 of Dorm Talk, a podcast which captures the conversations happening in America's college dorm rooms, ranging from ethical quandaries of new age media to Daniel's intense FIFA addiction. Once again, I'm your host, Evan Johnson, and today we're talking about the extent to which artists have control over their work, and more specifically, how digital work is informed by limitations of the digital medium through a case study into social media. I'm particularly interested in the way content is shaped by both the unwritten codes of conduct as well as the more concrete rules which are present in the digital. Yeah, thanks for your time this morning, guys. I know it's a busy final season for
Are we
at least
already?
one of you. We are recording.
Oh, nice.
Isn't that neat?
Are we gonna do a test?
Do you guys want to introduce yourselves?
I'm Ethan. You may find out more about me later.
I think you're next, Vicky.
I'm Vicky. I'm a Pomona senior.
Wow.
I'm Patrick. I've been making digital media for 5 years at this point.
How long have you been consuming it?
I don't consume digital media.
Wonderful. So I had this idea which I proposed to my friends, which is that what if art is simply the purest, most distilled comment on the society within which the artist themselves is a product of? What if good art is just that which we find most representative of, or perhaps provides the most accurate comment on, the societal structure which it's produced under? If art is taken to be a distillation of the artist's experiences and inspirations, and given that those experiences and inspirations are informed by the society which an artist exists in, it should follow that their art is a distillation of said society. I would posit the idea that this is not a failure or a downfall of society or of the artist, but rather a powerful and important realization the consumer must come to. One which ultimately increases the value of the art by supplying that same consumer with a poignant comment on the structure within which they too live. And that this perhaps is the most powerful and moving accomplishment of art, when it evokes a realization within the viewer and furthers their understanding of the artist's world, which is also their own. And given the rising use of social media, as well as content both created and consumed on different social media platforms, I was curious as to how this content was informed by the structures of these platforms. That is, how digital content is informed by the platform it's created for, similar to how art is informed by the society it's created within. I think perhaps one of the best examples of content being informed by the digital medium is the short story Black Box by Jennifer Egan, published on Twitter, with each sentence being its own tweet due to the character limit enforced by Twitter. In a way, it mimics how a serial TV show may release each episode of a new season individually. As a result, every installment had to be captivating and attention-grabbing on its own, as it lacked the surrounding context of the previous or the following sentences which may have been lost in users' feeds. Every tweet became an argument, a plot point, its own episode, slowly moving the story further while providing its own entertainment value, in itself external of the story. Each installment acts more and more like episodes of a TV show, slowly advancing that story. Much like how an episode of How I Met Your Mother, you can start with any episode in the series and understand it by itself, but you may not get the greater surrounding significance the episode plays in the story. Furthermore, the immediacy and live platform which Twitter provides lends itself nicely to the story told in the second-person perspective, as Black Box is. It feels as though the story is unfolding even while you read it, and it is presently taking place. And with each sentence being published individually across a few days, the audience certainly may have felt like they were getting something like live updates. This is effective because it gives the reader a breath to think about each installment and unpack the Maxim-esque lines before moving on to the next. This may be why the Marvel movies are so successful. You don't have to watch them all in order to understand any one individually. because each of them has its own open and shut story, but together they create a much larger narrative of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's almost as though the digital is creating a melting pot of media, where bingeable TV seasons on Netflix are becoming more like 10-hour movies, and movies, like in the MCU, are taking the form of old serial TV shows, set in installments every week. So to this, I was curious how my friends experience these rules and limitations in their own use of social media, and Vicky had this to say.
It's interesting. I think I do have very set rules about how I treat each one. And I think it's interesting how those interact, because like Instagram's the pictures I post very infrequently on Instagram. So when I feel like, hey, this is a big thing and a cool picture, I'm gonna share it. Otherwise, I just like look and take in a lot. And then Snapchat, I used to use like religiously. I still use it because I like the constant, like not like neediness, but non-consequential contact you have with people. And then Twitter is also the best social media site that was ever made to ever exist ever.
Yeah.
And I think that's just so fascinating because the same way that like Instagram and Twitter can be built for likes, just the sheer mass and quantity of Twitter is what allows it to still be so like unfiltered. Like I will just go on rants on Twitter and be like, everyone's an idiot. I can't for the life of me understand how this could be happening and this could be happening. And like it's cool when I get likes and people like them, but a lot of times I'm just gonna be like out there doing it and be like, I'm angry and this is stupid. Because like in a larger scale, the Twitter like timeline, it's gonna get lost, and if people hate it, okay. I think my biggest internal conflict when it comes to my posting on social medias is the rise of the Instagram story, because it is essentially, and also like basic stories are for psychos, so that doesn't really matter. But like Instagram story is something that's like picked up a lot of traction, and so a lot of people will say like Snapchat is dead, but also Instagram I think also like captured where people are already using pictures to post for the permanence. I think in my mind, I still think like Snapchat is like the epitome of a raw unfiltered video, so I'll put absolutely stupid things that my friends are doing on there. But like on an Instagram video, it's gonna be more likely a really cool place, a really cool dinner, a really cool like something that I really want. It's like still temporal. I don't care enough to like make a whole post about it, but it's also something I want to share with a kind of not polish, like with an intention of like other people watching it. As opposed to Snapchat world, they again have like it's like way too much content that I know no one likes. I'm gonna put on my Snapchat story because like we think it's hilarious. But on Instagram, I'm gonna be like, here's a very intentional post about how our cross country team won nationals, or how I'm supporting our women's soccer team doing this, or this is a really cool restaurant in Ghana that I don't think other people would be like, oh, Ghana has cool restaurants, so I'm gonna very intentionally put that.
I feel like it's partially due to the format of the media, because with Snapchat it's sort of this like, you know, it disappears after a certain amount of time, so it's like you're able to like show that like less polished side without really considering like what the repercussions of that could be, because it will just disappear at some point, whereas like with Instagram people put much more thought into it, like, okay, I'm putting this on, and then I'll have to like actively remove it.
So for Vicky, Twitter is for rants to get lost. It's for a place where she can vent and expect nobody to see it, and there to be no repercussions simply because of the mass of tweets. Whereas Instagram is for intentional posts meant to draw out certain aspects of what has just happened, or to share certain special stories or events. Meanwhile, Snapchat, she uses for the more ridiculous things she wants to capture and share, but recognizes they might not be as interesting to many people. And Snapchat's less formal, more temporal structure allows for this. In this way, Vicky's use of social media is great at exemplifying the way that the different forms and formats of these platforms dictate what sort of content she creates and shares for these platforms. And then Pat, what typically would you say is your digital medium?
I used to make a lot of YouTube videos. I had a channel which had 1,400 subscribers, 1 million views or so. Which is to say that it was people consumed the media, not that it was good or anything. So I was 9 years old, and I really liked Lego Star Wars. And what I would do is I would take my Legos and I would build something So like Ethan was describing, I'd build something in analog and physical, and then I would record it pretty much without editing. One take, I'd put a little title at the beginning, say like clone Star Wars or clone base on Naboo or something, and that'd be it, and I'd just go through it representing this physical thing electronically to share. So one interesting thing there is it's pretty distinct from what Ethan's doing insofar as I'm not creating it digitally. I'm just using the digital format as a way of representing physical work, so more of a distribution method.
Are you surprised by how many people were like into that?
Oh yeah, no, it was weird. I mean, I stopped making these videos probably 9 years ago, and people still leave comments like, when's Lego Bob coming back? Where have you been? Like I was part of the kind of the rise of the Lego community on YouTube, and just people were really into these big clone bases. But it was interesting because I was
Yeah. As a 9-year-old, I don't know how much you thought about this, but if the sort of way that it was going to be watched, or if your audience influenced your sort of creation at all, if you were creating these Lego bases in response to what you thought your audience may want to see, or if it's creating what you wanted and then recording it and sharing it. Did you ever balance that, or did you create for the consumption, or was it more of just your artistic expression of Lego Star Wars?
I started just making bases and what are called my own creations, mocks, is what you would call them. I would think of a cool little idea. Because I watched Star Wars, I would say, oh, this is a neat scene from Star Wars, and I'd want to make something that had themes relating to it. Of course, I was 9, so it didn't really look like anything I wanted to make. It looked like a bunch of 2x4s stacked on top of each other to make some sort of Stalinistic fort. But like, to start with, I just made things, and then people started commenting. There's a whole community of builders who used different techniques, and I started adapting things from what I saw to make my things more complicated, because I eventually discovered that the more intricate, more detailed, the more plants and what's called greebling, which is where you just add like a bunch of details and damage, stuff like that. The more you had of that, the more people would watch it.
Mm-hmm.
And people would leave comments like, wow, that's so cool, or that's amazing, or they would leave mean comments like, get a girlfriend, or you're a virgin.
As a 9-year-old?
Yeah. which I thought was pretty funny.
So for Pat, YouTube served as an outlet for him to both share his hobby as well as learn and become inspired to do a better job of it, to make things more complex, and to really explore the true limits of Lego Star Wars. However, towards the end, it's worth noting the rude comments which he was receiving at the time, and as a 9-year-old, that is awfully, as funny as it is now, it truly is slightly troubling, and it begins to beg the question of how do the interactions which take place on the digital manifest themselves in our physical lives? How do those pressures of social media platforms permeate into other aspects of our lives in the present? And I wonder how they're able to remove us from the present.
Yeah. I know you've certainly explored more with Instagram than I have in terms of making accounts and having different accounts for different things and taking down accounts. What's your rationale throughout all of that?
It's an interesting question. I definitely I will create and take down accounts pretty regularly, or I just put them on pause for a little while, because I feel like I value moderation with those things. And so when I don't feel or when I feel like I've kind of gotten sucked into it, and that's the whole point of the platforms, right? They want to suck you in. So when I start to catch that, I'll just remove the account for a little bit, reset, and then get back on once I feel like I've found center ground again. So it's not really I don't know, it's kind of a process I go through that's not like, it's not just like reactionary, like, oh, I'm deleting my account.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm gonna make an account. It's kind of more like thoughtful than that, I guess.
Mhm.
It's just in like trying to not get like too involved in it.
This idea which Ethan brought up about social media intending to suck you in began to make me wonder how myself and others tangibly experienced this. Immediately I thought of the outdoors and how our experiences in it are changed by trying to capture it for social media. Pat, I'm sort of interested to hear your take on social media and its place in the outdoors. Taking photos of sort of outdoor adventures and these really kind of serene and remote places.
I think that, so my tendency when going outdoors is, or my instinct is to not take any photos, because I think what I want to do when I'm outside is pretty much at odds with like taking my phone out all the time and taking photos, but I mainly take photos, like you said, so that I can first have memories of what I did, so I can see what I did, and also to capture how pretty it was. But I think it has mostly, when most people who are posting things are using it as a social function, because outdoors is pretty much this like channeled way of saying, oh, look at me, I'm outdoors, and it has like these implicit implications that kind of inform like some sort of social capital.
Mm-hmm.
And I think most people who are posting outdoors photos are like, oh, look at me, I'm doing this cool stuff.
Yeah.
Not to say that they're going outdoors because of it, but I think it's a motivating factor oftentimes. So yeah, there's kind of a nexus of implications around why people do it, what the effect is, and how it informs your experience outside.
Yeah. Are you familiar at all with Snapchatting Everest?
No.
In 2015, 2016, I think, Adrian Bollinger and Corey Richards Snapchatted their entire trip up Mount Everest. And what ended up happening was clearly there's no internet on Mount Everest, and they had terrible cell reception, so they paid something like $27,000 across their trip for satellite internet. And they spent like hours and hours every day, like outside, trying to just upload these snapshots to their story.
Mm-hmm.
And on their final push for the summit, their phones died. and so they couldn't Snapchat the top. They couldn't Snapchat themselves summiting the entire kind of like end point of this journey. And I think that's really kind of evident of how reliant you are on the limitations of the digital, whether that be your battery life or it be your cellular connection, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's funny that it would die for this summit. Yeah, and to shed a bit more light on this case, it was actually Adrian Bollinger's girlfriend who proposed using Snapchat. She suggested the platform because she thought it would provide a more authentic look into the experience. And Corey Richard, the climbing partner, actually later said in an interview that Snapchat was much more raw, a much more visceral, and more in the moment. I thought this was funny, though, because, as I mentioned, to upload these, they required satellite internet, and for that, they required to sit by their small satellite dish for hours on end, rather than actually being on the mountain, enjoying the mountain, and living this experience. Something which would imaginably remove themselves from the very experience they're trying to share. This is, of course, a rather extreme example, but I think the essence of it still holds true anytime an individual is trying to capture a moment. Because by capturing it, you're inherently doing just that. You're not living it, at least for the few moments you're taking that photo. This is a burden which the structure of social media imposes on its users. The pressure to create, the pressure to post, the pressure to share. It all takes over the user, and it results in this culture of hurriedly showing rather than doing, or at least doing for the sake of showing. As art evokes a realization within the viewer about the world in which they live, I hope this podcast is able to evoke a similar realization about the rules of the digital within which we create and consume, about the system within which each of us act and perpetuate. I hope I have highlighted how these rules of the digital have come to tangibly influence our non-digital lives, and by combating the pressure felt to play by these camouflaged rules many are not cognizant of in the first place, restored some autonomy to you, the individual. This was episode 2 of Dorm Talk. Thanks for listening.